Nowadays, the internet has become the ultimate open media network, making it a tremendous engine for free speech and democratic participation. That's the reason why consumers and advocates have proposed the idea of net neutrality, a concept designed to keep this freedom.
Net neutrality is this issue that has been percolating for the last 6 years or so, and it's really about control. It's about who controls your internet experience. Up until now, in the relatively young age of the internet, the last 20 years or so, that control has been in the hands of the internet users, and that's what's made the internet so revolutionary.
Currently, there are no clear legal restrictions about the control of online content, but some companies are pushing to put this flood of free information and access in the hands of large media owners. With minority media ownership at 8% and no major Hispanic content providers, minority networks are being pushed to make use of the new multimedia platforms where there is more diversity compared to broadcast.
Well, I mean, we have right now the net neutrality protections that were in place in the first decade of the internet are no longer there. There's been a series of regulatory decisions by the FCC, by courts and Congress that have basically taken net neutrality protections out of the internet.
Without net neutrality, broadband suppliers will not only control rates and services, but will also control by setting the limits and restricting certain websites to different consumers.
And what they're trying to do with their internet connections is to try to control the content that flows over that in a way that takes choice away from internet users and puts it back in the hands of these very large media companies. So this is a sort of a fundamental struggle that's going on right now. We call it a critical juncture in the future of media. Will the future be open? Will we have net neutrality protections going forward, or will we revert to a more closed model where you have a handful of companies that control the flow of information?
If that were to be the case, if Latinos are once again left out of the picture when it comes to broadband licenses, they will also be missing out on content. Could this new industry revolutionize not only in technology, but in diversification?
When a lot of our viewers woke up this morning, they didn't realize that they were going to have to form a position and have an opinion on net neutrality. Jessica, does the National Hispanic Media Coalition have a position on network neutrality? What are you urging the federal government to do?
Yes, we do. We are strongly in support of net neutrality regulations. This is vitally important for the Latino community. In the last segment, we talked about how the traditional media, broadcasting, television, and radio isn't necessarily serving our community, that our voices aren't being heard in the same way that we would like them to be. But on the web, at this point in time, that's not true. We can tell our own stories in a way that we think is fair and accurate. We can look for job opportunities online. We fear that if we don't have net neutrality regulations in place, that we're going to go back to the same old system that we have with traditional media, where there's gatekeepers that are giving us access to what they want us to have access to, slowing our access down, and not allowing us to speak in that space the way we've been able to up until this point in time.
Tyrone, you just heard Jessica talk about the possibility that future media couldn't be burdened by the past exclusion. Would net neutrality, or the lack of net neutrality, change that?
I think it has a major impact. What we've seen with the internet is the emergence of the most democratic means of dialogue, of people reaching people, that the world has ever seen. It is in its importance as significant as the printing press. It has developed without control by a single company or a group of single companies. It's still the case today that individuals can go and work in their garages and develop an application that overnight can become very important in this marketplace. That ability of the internet has to be preserved. Some of the gatekeepers, the people who actually transport traffic from users to the internet, to providers of internet kinds of services, some of those gatekeepers, in effect, want to control whose content gets priority, which content gets carried, which competitors get left out. It's extremely important that we not let that happen. That's one of the reasons why Media Access Project outright opposes the proposed merger between NBCU and Comcast, because we believe it creates an organization that is too large, that will have too dominant a control over the internet as well as over distribution generally.
Well, Joe, today in Brooklyn, our shared hometowns, a young Latino got up to go to work, maybe bought a newspaper, maybe checked out the news on a device that with a 2-inch screen, got on the train, headed into the city, came home that night, maybe consumed content on YouTube, maybe contributed some opinions to a blog, then maybe watched TV, cable or broadcast that night, called it a night, and they were done. And if you said, no, network neutrality is really important to you, and here's why, what's your pitch?
For us, everything we're talking about here, media ownership, the lack of Latinos in media, this all is about our community being able to tell our own stories in our own voice. For 200 years, we've been fighting for greater media inclusion, from the first Spanish language newspapers, El Habanero, to the present day. This is about us. When we are unable to tell our own stories, it causes great harm when other people define our realities. They, all the stereotypes in media, the lack of coverage, this is because other people tell our stories. And so with network neutrality, it means that we are able to go online and there's no gatekeeper telling us who we can communicate with, what content we put up there. We're able to directly communicate to a global audience. Our views, our opinions tell our own stories. And this would be wiped away if the telecom companies play as gatekeepers and decide who has access. This is the media ownership 2.0. This is the First Amendment of the internet. And that's the way you have to think about it. I believe our free speech rights online are at stake here.
But after the recent Supreme Court decision, aren't we at a moment right now where there is no network neutrality?
It was a circuit court opinion for the DC Circuit Court. Yes, right now, technically, if these telecom companies want to block, say you have that website, the young person in their garage, they say young Latino somewhere in Brooklyn, right, has that, create the next killer application or has this great website, yes, they can absolutely block this website, and there's nothing that can be done about it. There's no legal recourse right now because the SEC right now does not have the authority to be a traffic cop. Let's say.
So why haven't those terrible things you were predicting happened if network neutrality has been stripped away by
the SEC does have the authority technically. The problem is that they have since 2002 declined to exercise full authority. And the court said, well, if you're not going to exercise full authority, you can't exercise partial authority. So now the commission is looking at the question of whether they're going to go ahead and exercise full authority. And the companies that I call the carriers, the Comcasts, the Verizons, and the AT&Ts are fighting that because they want to be completely unregulated. As for your young man in Brooklyn who has all the devices and the applications and has instant news and instant communication, instant connection, instant variety, if it had not been for open networks, for open access, that young man today would not have those capabilities. That's the important thing to understand. What we've had in this country for the past 20 years is open access to our network so that content could flow and flow in very diverse forms.